All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 3rd of April, 2024, and this is the Cluster API Office Hours meeting. Cluster API is a subproject of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which basically means please raise your hand if you'd like to be called on, and please treat others as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to give a chance for new community members or new meeting attendees to introduce themselves. So I will be quiet and raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can say hi. All right. I'm not seeing any hands going up, but I'll give it in 3, 2. Okay, I see one hand going up. Richard, please.
Yeah, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Richard, and also this is my first time attending the Cluster API meeting. Fairly new to the Kubernetes community, and so I've been looking for opportunities where I can kind of step in and contribute where I can, based on my experience. So in my case, just to get a little bit about me, I'm a cloud solutions architect, been in the architecture space now for several years, including extended at Microsoft. Not currently there, but I was there previously. So focused primarily around Azure infrastructure, and past service design and implementation. So, like I said, been looking to get involved in the Kubernetes community. So, here to find out more about this particular SIG and see where I can perhaps lean in and contribute in any kind of way.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Richard. And yeah, if you're into cloud infrastructure, this is a good place to be for sure. All right. Well, let's see if we have any open proposals. I don't think we do. No open proposals currently. So let's get into our discussion topics. And as predicted, Fabrizio's got the first topic for us. So Fabrizio, please, a follow up on the timeline here.
Yeah, so last week, Stephen from the release team asked folks to follow up on this PR, where he's proposing the release timeline for the next copy release, so the 1.8. I looked into it and started thinking, and I made a kind of simulation where the not 1.8, but the next one is going to land, and if we keep the current scheduling, the 1.9 will land basically during Christmas holidays, which is not ideal. And so I made a little bit of math. So I think that we should shorten the next release cycle, or to rephrase this a little bit in a more general way, we should settle to a 16-week release cycle, plus the 2 weeks for KubeCon, and plus a 2 weeks break at end of year, new year. But yeah, please take a look at the comment, take a look at the PR, and write feedback.
Yeah, I think way to think ahead, Fabrizio. You're already at the end of the year. I hadn't even made it out of the summer yet. So definitely good thought about that. And yeah, no one wants to be here doing a release at Christmas time. Does anybody have questions or comments about this? Stephen, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. Do you have thoughts as to where we should trim in the existing one? I can also just follow up on the PR if we don't ask live.
Personally, I think that we should not shrink the beta RC process, because this is where we start basically beating the drum and working. So I think that we should shrink the development time frame. But this is really open up for discussion. We can also eventually drop a beta. I don't know. Really up to folks to figure it out.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Good question. Are there other questions? I don't see hands going up. So if there's no other questions or comments, we can move on to your next topic, Fabrizio. So there's a follow-up
Okay.
on the roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. So last week I talked about a PR that I've opened. This PR is merged and now is part of the book. And this idea of cluster API manifest, where we are going and why is a project. The PR merged a little bit faster than expected. I apologize about this, but if someone has comments, please feel free to open a PR or to or to reach out. We will find a way to address all the comments. Last week I also spoke about a couple of follow-up issue. The first one was about cleaning up and consolidating all the discussion thread that we have to on the website. This is done, and I've tried to make sure that to not have too many discussion open, if there are spending point to having issues, stuff like that. The second point was about to do a general backlog triage to do some cleanup, to gather ideas for the roadmap, etc., etc. So while doing this, I opened a PR to document how we do triage process, because it was not really well documented, but also to do some improvement. The main improvement is that I think that we should restore the bot that labels issue as a stale, rotten, and then close issue. For a couple of reasons, because this is healthy for the project, it helps to maintain a sane backlog, but also I think that is a great feedback for the person filing the issue. If your issue doesn't make progress, it is a clear sign that maybe the issue is too generic or not actionable, or maybe you have to work to create consensus around it. Or even more important, it could be a signal that unfortunately we lack contributors. So this can give you tools to go back to your manager and ask for ways to help the community. And there was also a nice talk at KubeCon from Bob from SIG country backs about how to talk with managers about justifying upstream contribution. Yeah, Bob Kinlan, thank you, Nora. And so, yeah, I think this is yeah, but just a small clarification. We have the stale bot thing, but unfortunately is being blocked by the triage, the triage labels. So in order to get it working, I'm proposing to move away from triage labels, which is the last point of basically this list. So yeah, again, this how I think we should do triage for the project. I know that is not a fancy activity, and but it is important. So please take a look and give feedback.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up, Fabrizio. So, I mean, great point and good documentation. Chris, you've got your hand up, please.
Yeah, so will this, I forget how this was disabled, but I know that it was turned off a while ago and I was really happy about it, because for some of the smaller sub projects, it keeps issues from literally being deleted from my view. Or having it turned off, rather, that is, because otherwise with it on, like, no, we don't have outside contributors helping. So my question is just like, if we turn this on for cluster API, is this going to be for all like the related SIGs, or is it just the main cluster API repo?
It is only for the main cluster API
Okay.
repo. You can set so that's a good question. I think that the bot is configured by test infra at org level, but you can go and change and you can make exception by repo.
Okay. Right.
So yeah, if you reach out, I will point you to the config page, and there are exceptions. I remember that kubectl is an exception, kind is an exception. I don't remember exception for cluster API subprojects.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Lubomir, please.
I wanted to ask, so if you add the triage accepted label, then the what was the name of this bot? Anyway, the stale the lifecycle bot stops acting on the ticket, basically.
Exactly, and I discovered this by looking into the triage, the stale bot configuration yesterday. So yeah.
Well, it's more of a, it almost feels like a problem that has to be fixing the tooling, because so initially you could accept a ticket, right? It makes sense to be accepted, and then it feels like the lifecycle bot should still kick in at some point.
Yeah, this was my expectation as well, but the default so the tool, basically the bot configuration is like a GitHub query, and you can filter and for label or for the lack of label. And currently it is configured that if a label, if an issue has triage accepted, is not closed or considered stale or rotten. But you can make your own project configuration. So,
so it's
not.
possible.
Yes, it's not that the bot does not support it. It's just the default configuration that is there that is done this way. I don't know historical context.
It makes sense to reconfigure it so that triage accepted can coexist with the lifecycle, at least from my point of view, because the needs triage label is useful to just filter everything that is pending. I mean, obviously, I haven't helped at all with cluster API triage, which is my fault.
You're doing a lot of work, don't worry. But yeah, this was my expectation as well. But the current configuration is not. Changing it is not easy because this bot is configured for 3 orgs, and so it will require an endless discussion. So I think that the simplest way to go forward is the one that I proposed in the PR, is just drop the triage label, use priority or some other signal to figure it out what issues are triaged or not. But it is described in the PR. You can take a look, and I really appreciate your feedback.
Maybe is also you can just have a GitHub action, which is so much simpler than the pro, basically. Yes. Okay, thanks.
Good discussion there. Does anybody else have questions about Fabrizio's kind of larger topic here about the roadmap and the backlog triage? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up. Thanks again, Fabrizio, for all the work here. I think this is important to the health of the project for sure.
Mike, if I could add a very last point. So
Yeah,
while I'm going through the backlog, I'm keeping posting good for issues and /help issue in the channel. So this go back to Richard question. So if folks are looking for work, have a little bit of bandwidth, I will try to make it visible.
That is tremendous, especially with all the new faces we have showing up and people looking to help out. So again, Fabrizio, thank you for all your hard work here. Definitely appreciate it. Okay. So next topic, Lubomir, you've got something about the autoscaler annotations here, please.
Yeah, this is, to be clear, I haven't reproduced this, but somebody internally in VMware told me about it, and basically the story is, the TLDR is that if you have the autoscaler active on a particular machine deployment, and you also go in there, quote unquote, go in there and modify manually the replica field, then from what the person reported to me is that the situation could be the autoscaler ends up with countless retries to create new machines and delete them. This is a plausible scenario according to them. No, I haven't seen this, but the biggest concern here was like that it can result in resource exhaustion if you have, for example, you leave this running and you forget about it, then you have like extensive logs somewhere, like something is logging all the VM creation business. Eventually, the hard disks are getting full. It's not. I haven't seen. Again, I haven't seen what exactly happens, but we had a quick discussion with Stefan about this, and basically the story is we don't want the user to be able to mutate the replica field if the autoscaler is active on this MD. And we also, if you scroll in the PR, we basically had a discussion like, in the issue also we had a discussion. But basically the story was, hey, do we want to do this on the cluster object also if the user is applying the annotations on the cluster class objects? And then these annotations obviously propagate to the MDs. And I sent a PR today. I tried to cover all possible scenarios. I'm not really much of a cluster API webhook expert, but basically the PR is open. The ticket is there. If anybody wants to take a look at the problem and review my PR, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing this up, Lubomir. I'll definitely take a look at the PR and the issue. I think like just to kind of explain what should happen, right? The cluster autoscaler in normal circumstances has a loop interval of 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, it'll wake up and see if it needs to do anything. And in the cluster API case, if a user were to change the replicas out of band with the cluster autoscaler, in general, that's a safe procedure. But if you go outside of the minimum and maximum, the cluster autoscaler will stop processing that machine deployment or node group, or however you want to look at it. So you have to be careful not to put the replicas outside of that. And then secondly, if I were to increase the replica count manually and new machines were created, and the autoscaler would be able to handle that. And what would probably happen is after like a 10-minute timeout, which is the default time, the autoscaler would see that those nodes are underutilized and it would remove them, or it might be 15 minutes. But so like if those nodes never got utilized, the autoscaler would just remove them after like 10 or 15 minutes. On the other hand, if the user decreased the replicas and made a bunch of pods become pending, the autoscaler would probably immediately try to make nodes to satisfy those pods. So it's not disastrous if the user modifies the replica field outside of the autoscaler, but it will change the way the autoscaler behaves depending on what the cluster scenario is. So this is one of those things where like, if we make it mutually exclusive and somehow the user has an error and the replica count goes outside of the range, they'll have to manually update it. And at that point, what would cluster API do? Like, would I have to, as a user, would I have to like remove the auto scaling annotations, then change the replica, then re-add the annotations? Like, I think there are some questions, but I could certainly enumerate these on the issue and just kind of raise them there.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically saying what happens if the user manually puts a replica value outside of the minimum and maximum?
Yeah. Then it would stop, like the autoscaler would stop processing that group and you would have to manually remediate it. And if we made it so that a user can't modify the replica count when the autoscaler annotations are there, then as a user, I would have to like remove the autoscaler annotations, change the replica count, and then add them back in. Or maybe, maybe there's another way to address it as well, but I would think that would be something a user would have to do to fix it, basically.
Is it possible to pause the validation webhook that prevents the edit of the replica field?
That's a good question. I'm not so sure about that. Does anyone else have? I don't know those mechanics quite as well. Yeah, Fabrizio, please.
Comments. So the first one is about pausing webhooks. I consider this always a bad practice, because if you pause the webhook, you don't have control if some other components trigger an operation that needs the webhook. So it does not only affect you, but it affects everyone. There are other ways, like thinking about a notation that disable the webhook only for one object. But I think that for the specific use case, if a user has to delete machine, there are ways to do it. You just go and apply a force remediation label to a machine, and it gets remediated. Or you go and delete the machine, and these always work. So yeah, let's think. Let's discuss option on the issue and this corner case, which is super important. The second thing that I would like to point out to Lubomir is that we have an end-to-end test that basically set up a cluster with the autoscaler. And yeah, you can use it and basically stop before the cluster gets deleted, or run the end-to-end test locally and tell to not delete the cluster at the end. So you get a cluster with autoscaler and I think also a fake workload that when you deploy, it can trigger the autoscaler to work or not, and you can, yeah, test all the corner cases.
Scott, you got your hand up, please.
Yeah, Lubomir, correct me if I'm wrong. This is specifically with cluster class. When you set the replica on the cluster class, correct? On the cluster object, not directly on a machine deployment.
From my discussions with the person who reported it, they also said it's possible to replicate it in the legacy scenario without cluster class.
Okay, because I've definitely seen this with cluster class, where the topology controller is going to, if you set the replicas and you're using autoscaler, the autoscaler will just get into a terrible situation because each one is trying to configure the replicas. That I've seen. I've never seen this in legacy happen, but with cluster class, it's for sure mutually exclusive. Either set the replicas or don't and use autoscaler. But you still can manually change it on the machine deployment from what I've seen, at least. And it's the same behavior with KID or any other autoscaler from experience.
So you're talking about the setting directly on the AMD, but from my understanding, then this AMD will be eventually reconciled with a different replica value. Or am I wrong about this?
It depends. If you have autoscaler and haven't set the replicas in the cluster object, then it defaults to one replica, and then the autoscaler will start autoscaling. And if you change it and the autoscaler decides that a change needs to happen, it will happen. If you put it in or outside of the range of the autoscaler, it'll stay there until you bring it back in. But as long as it's not on the cluster object, the cluster class operator will not intervene. So it's one less thing that's trying to intervene with the replicas, which makes it a much better situation, at least.
Yeah, I see. But thanks for confirming this. The scenarios can be really problematic. This is what we saw, basically. It can basically enter a state of race where two modules are racing for the same field. And basically, you ended up in a situation where too many resources are exhausted and the user completely did not notice this problem.
It may have crashed my vCenter using cap V. Oops. Yeah, when I set the replicas and had an autoscaler. So I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, that's a surprise. Okay, well, Lubomir, this is a great point to bring up. I will spend some time over the next few days and go back and add my comments there, and maybe others will as well. And we can at least explain the issue a little deeper and maybe come to a conclusion about what the right answer here is.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, cool. Theo, you've got the next topic with consistent reporting of paused resources. So please take it away. Now, is Theo here? I see you unmuted, Theo, but I'm not hearing you.
Cool.
Oh,
Nice.
perfect.
I think my network might be dodgy, so sorry. Cool. So I think, yeah, I started doing some work on this, and then it was raised by, I think, Fabrizio and some other people that we might not have discussed it. So I thought this might be a good chance to discuss and hear what people's thoughts were. Effectively, I think what my understanding or takeaway from this is, sorry, I realize I've just added it to the agenda, so you might not have read it. It is, as an end user, I want to know when a controller has paused a resource, so I can then take some downstream action. A sensible way to do this seems to be adding a condition that acknowledges this. But I guess the contract could be different, right? It could be something other than a condition. So, yeah.
I mean, yeah, condition seems like the right way to do this. Does anybody have a comment on this? Or I guess we've got good discussion on the issue, it looks like. Fabrizio, please.
Yeah, so first of all, I have to go through all the latest comment, but I think that from a high-level point of view, these are really good things to have. So it will make the state of the resource explicit and more transparent. What we are discussing are the mechanics for this to happen, and the main issue is that usually you apply the pause on the cluster level, and from that moment the machine is blocked, but the machine is not going to reconcile immediately. And so, yeah, there are maybe this is just excess of concern, but yeah, we have to figure it out exactly how these annotation pop-ups in the variable object, etc. So we are sure that we are giving a valuable feedback to the user. It is just to figure it out, mechanics and implementation details. But the idea is sound and good for me.
So I guess.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So just I'm quite new to Cappy, so just to make sure I'm completely understanding you, you're talking about you have a cluster that owns some child resource, and if that's paused at the cluster level, then the child will not reconcile, but there will be no, at the moment, indication on the child object.
Yeah, so the mechanics are the following. Let's make an example. I have cluster, machine deployment, and machines. So let's assume that machine deployment are watching clusters. So that means that probably when you do something on the cluster, machine deployment get immediately reconciled. And so we will give an immediate feedback oh, also this machine deployment is paused. Then if we go down one level, and I don't remember, but let's assume that machine is not watching for clusters. So that means that you pause the cluster, but you will not get the signal immediately on the machine. And you have to wait until the machine is reconciled, and this could happen after 10 minutes, which is the sync time. So I did not investigate this in detail, but this is what we have to figure it out. If the signal is going to be propagated timely and in a useful way, if we have to add some watch, if we want to add some watch, because at the end they will impact on performance, stuff like that. But really, when talking about implementation detail, I think that you started with a PR, that's a good way, start, experiment, figure it out if the signal propagates well, and eventually come back and ask for guidance.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Like, does this need to be written up in an enhancement, or would a PR be good enough to kind of start showing this?
Okay, awesome.
Sorry, I answered to Mike because I don't think that this requires a PR unless we are thinking that not only the copy object, but also all the infrastructure object needs to have this new paused field or paused condition. So if we want to make this a contract that all the provider have to or can support, we have to find a way to make it formal. Could be a small proposal, it could be an amendment to the documentation, and we ask for the community to approve it and stuff like that. But yeah, if it is only copy, it is a PR in this repository. If it is all the provider, we have to seek for consensus.
Cool. Does that I guess, does that make sense to you, Theo? Maybe like look at making a PR for this as next steps, and then we could debate over the PR.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Any other questions or comments about this topic? All right, I'm not seeing any hands going up, and that looks like the end of our regular discussion topics. So let's get into provider updates here. Looks like we got some good ones today. So Matt, please take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Nothing big. We just have a couple patch releases in Cluster API for Azure, and we've been integrating the CapZ betas, and everything was green. And then RC.0 came out and turned machine pools on by default, so we have to fix some unit tests up. It's kind of a self-own. But other than that, everything's good.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, yay for more testing, right? Nolan, you're up next.
Yeah, we're working on a 1.7 bump for Cappy, and it is passing CI as of this morning. And we're hoping to do a feature or a point release on Friday, April 5th. So yeah.
Cool, awesome, thank you. Great to see all the 1.7 action going on here. And Christian, you're next.
Yeah, similar for Cappy. We just did release some minutes ago the v1.10.0 RC1, which uses Cappy 1.7.0 RC0. We did hit issues with the release notes tool because there were some breaking changes there. I opened a thread in Slack for this. The Slack thread currently only describes one issue. We have a follow-up, but yeah, I will comment that on the Slack thread too. Yeah, that's it.
Cool, thank you. Matt, we're coming back around to you for the add-ons. provider.
And the mute button. Yeah, I just added this just in time because we also updated the cluster API add-on provider for Helm to use 170 RC0, and it's green. And I will put a link there in just a second.
Cool. Awesome. And Nolan working quickly to get another update in here.
Yeah, CapG is also getting an update. Damiano is handling that, but it looks like it needs to be updated for the RC. So, yep.
Awesome. Lots of progress going on here. And I don't know what it was for me when I got down to these provider updates. I read CAPI as Cap I, and I was like, what is Cap I? So it's getting to be a long day. All right. So that's the end of our provider updates. We got one feature group update, just a PSA that we're having a meeting of the Carpenter feature group today. Yeah, maybe CapI is cluster API IBM. Nice. Yeah, so we have a Carpenter PSA meeting today. It'll be in about 20 minutes. Just got a couple of agenda items, and yeah, that'll be about it. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. Does anyone have ad hoc topics they wanted to add before we go here? We had a pretty decent meeting today. Please add yourself to the attending list if you didn't. Going in 3, 2, 1. Okay, well, that's the meeting. Thanks for coming out, and we'll see you next week, everybody.